The demon Choronzon. A curious error has entered into many systems of occult thought. This is the notion of some higher self or true will which has been misappropriated from the monotheistic religions. There are many who like to think that they have some inner self which is somehow more real or spiritual than their ordinary lower self. Facts do not bear this out. There is no part of one's beliefs about oneself which cannot be modified by sufficiently powerful psychological techniques. There is nothing about oneself which cannot be taken away or changed. The proper stimuli can, if correctly applied, turn communists into fascists, saints into devils, the meek into heroes, and vice versa. There is no sovereign sanctuary within ourselves which represents our real nature. There is nobody at home in the internal fortress. Everything we cherish as our ego, everything we believe in, is just what we have cobbled together out of the accident of our birth and subsequent experiences. With drugs, brainwashing, and other techniques of extreme persuasion, we can readily make a man a devotee of a different ideology, the patriot of a different country, or the follower of a different religion. Our mind is just an extension of the body, and there is no part of it which cannot be taken away or modified. The only part of ourself which exists above the temporary and mutable psychological structure we call the ego is the Kia. Kia is a deliberately meaningless term given to the vital spark or life force within us. The Kia is without form. It is neither this nor that. There is almost nothing we can say of it except that it is the void center of consciousness, and it is what it touches. It does not have any qualities like goodness, compassion, or spirituality, nor their opposites. It does, however, give a feeling of meaning or consciousness when we experience or will anything, and it becomes more apparent to us when we experience something powerfully. Laughter in ecstasy gives us a glimpse of it. The center of consciousness is formless and without qualities of which the mind can form images. There is no one at home. Kia is anonymous. We are an incomprehensible biomystic force field from hyperspace, if you like, with a mind and body attached. The mistake of so many occult systems is to imagine that the Kia has some preordained or intrinsic quality or nature. This is just wishful thinking, trying to give cosmic significance to the ego. Our ego is what the mind thinks we are. It is an image of ourselves which grows out of our life experiences, our body, sex, race, religion, culture, education, socialization, fears, and desires. There is a great pressure on us to develop an integrated and assertive ego. We are supposed to know exactly who we are and what we believe, and are supposed to be able to defend that identity. The more strongly we identify with something, the more strongly we must reject its opposite. Thus, the strongest, most obsessive egos belong to the least complete beings. For these types, there is the additional problem that to exalt any principle will eventually attract its opposite. Those who exalt strength will be drawn into a position of weakness. Those who strive for good will become embroiled in evil. Developing an ego is like building a castle against reality. It provides some defense and a sense of purpose, but the larger it is, the more it invites attack, and ultimately it must crumble. There is a further problem. All fortresses are also prisons. Because our beliefs imply a rejection of their opposites, they severely restrict our freedom. Most mystics and religiously oriented magicians describe their mystical experience in terms of transcendence. They describe themselves as having been swept up into something far greater, as a leaf in a hurricane, or as a teardrop slipping into an ocean. They claim that their own ego has been obliterated and merged into union with Godhead. Nothing of the sort has occurred. They have merely employed some form of Gnostic exaltation to inflate their own ego into an immense version of God that they have been carefully cultivating. The process differs not one whit from that employed by the black magician who also inflates his ego to cosmic dimensions, save that the religious types need a God in whose name to advance their own interests. They may also make a passing show of humility to conceal from themselves the enormity of their megalomania. Exactly the same thing happens when a magician attempts to invoke his holy guardian angel. The source of consciousness exists as the powers of will and perception. Any names, images, symbols, and directives that the magician receives will only be exaggerated artifacts of his own mind and ego, and possibly telepathic fragments from other people. Because he obtains these communications in a Gnostic state, he is likely to accept them uncritically. Gnosis also unleashes some subconscious creativity, and the messages are likely to be even more alluring if they are strung together with unexpected cleverness. We, each of us, have a real holy guardian angel, or Kia, which is our power of consciousness, magic, and genius. We also have a regrettable capacity to become obsessed with the mere products of our genius, mistaking them for the genius itself. These obsessional side effects have a generic name, Choronzon, or perhaps the demon's Choronzon, for its name is multiple. To worship these creations is to imprison oneself in madness and to invoke eventual disaster. Belief in a god or belief in one's ego are the same thing. Every man is already his own diseased version of God. Both the religious maniac and the black magician acquire a certain charisma and mission from their respective obsessions, but ultimately their quest is futile, for they cannot get beyond their own inflated fears and desires to the real thing, the anonymous and formless, yet fantastic, power source within themselves. That we are conscious, magical, and creative is the most mysterious and incredible thing in the universe. Any god or higher self we can imagine is necessarily less amazing than what we ourselves actually are, for it is merely one of our own creations. Myself, I am unwilling to give any sensible name, attribute, or glyph to the infinite mystery within the core of my consciousness and behind the illusion of the universe. It has been wisely said that the absolute is either ineffable or it is less than us. To invoke the real holy guardian angel, or Kia, is a paradoxically difficult task. As it has no form, there is no way to get an imaginative grip on it. It cannot be willed or perceived, for it is itself the root of will and perception. If one invokes the holy guardian angel with the general expectation of various signs and manifestations, then one's genius and magical capacities will usually provide these if enough gnosis is employed. Alternatively, if one enters an exalted state in an unplanned way, then the free belief generated will usually attach itself to any incipient mystical ideas one may have. In both cases, one has missed the boat. Let me repeat my startlingly simple message. The real holy guardian angel is just the force of consciousness, magic, and genius itself, nothing more. This cannot manifest in a vacuum. It is always expressed in some form, but its expressions are not the thing itself. There are perhaps only two things one can do to invoke the real holy guardian angel, or Kia. Firstly, the ego can be put in its place by deliberately seeking union with anything one has rejected. Secondly, the hidden God force Kia can be felt as the root of all acts of consciousness, magic, and genius by performing as diverse and extensive a series of these acts as possible. Invoke often, as the oracle said, and banish Choronzon wherever it manifests.